Look, Bumble knows you're exhausted by dating. All the must not take yourself too seriously and 6'1" since that matters. And what do I even say other than hey? Well, that's why they're introducing an all-new Bumble with exciting features to make compatibility easier, starting the chat better, and dating safer. They've changed, so you don't have to. Download the new Bumble now.
Did you know that Organifi makes products for kids? They just launched their brand new kids product called Organifi Protect. This is a delicious wild berry punch that tastes just like Kool-Aid you used to have as a kid, but without the sugar. This delicious berry punch is crafted with the purest organic ingredients, including a potent combination to bolster your child's immune defenses. It's especially formulated for kids with no artificial ingredients and gentle enough for them to drink every day. If you already love Organifi, you can add Organifi Kids Protect into your regimen, or if you're new to Organifi, check out their line of organic superfood blends that offer plant-based nutrition and high-quality ingredients, helping you move from a depleted to nourished state. Head over to www.organifi.com/bestofyou and use code bestofyou for 20% off your entire order. That's www.organifi.com/bestofyou. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Allison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Best of You podcast. I am so glad you're here. I'm so excited for this episode today. There is so much to unpack as it relates to lying. But before we dive in, I want to remind you to please pick up your copy of I Shouldn't Feel This Way if you haven't already. I lay out the 3-step framework: name, frame, and brave in detail in the first few chapters of the book. And this framework is designed to help you find your way through some of these more complicated, sort of thorny challenges that we all face that don't have a quick fix solution. In today's episode, we're going to apply this 3-step framework to this very prevalent phenomena of lying. I did a lot of research on the topic. It was fascinating. It was convicting to me personally, and it was really illuminating. And my goal for this episode today is really to not only inspire and encourage you to name, frame, and brave more honesty in your relationships, but also to give you really practical tools and scripts and strategies for how to do that in especially thorny or tricky or tough situations. In the research, I discovered 2 competing facts that I think are really profound. Number 1, there are tremendous psychological benefits to honesty. Studies have found that people who are more honest tend to experience less stress and anxiety. They have improved mental health overall. They enjoy healthier, more intimate relationships. They experience higher degrees of personal integrity. This idea that who you are on the inside matches how you show up with other people. And lastly, people who practice honesty tend to make better decisions. Their decisions tend to reflect their true needs, their true desires, and as a result, they tend to enjoy greater satisfaction in their lives. And I'm calling honesty a practice for a reason. It doesn't always come naturally. But here's the thing. As we practice honesty, starting by getting really honest with ourselves and with God, and then moving into our relationships with other people, we come into that alignment with the truth, which is so critical for a healthy, whole, meaningful, purpose-filled life on this earth. No matter what our circumstances are, it's one thing we have some control over. We can live with a lot of integrity, no matter what is going on around us. And I really believe this is what we need most right now, is to dig in and lean into being people of honesty. I truly believe that creating a culture of honesty is so vital to the health of our world today. And it starts with you and me making a commitment to it in our own immediate spheres of influence. Here's the thing. Honesty is so good for our mental health. And yet the statistics on the prevalence of lying reveal that most of us are lying at least daily. Here's some just basic statistics about the prevalence of lying. And this doesn't even get at the culture of lying and gaslighting and the larger systems around us, right? This is just getting at our own individual selves. An average person lies 1 to 2 times a day. 60% of people lie at least once in a 10-minute conversation. This is from research done by social psychologist Bella DiPaolo and her colleagues. Men tend to tell more self-serving lies that aggrandize or sort of puff up their accomplishments, whereas women are more likely to tell those lies that try to save other people's feelings or smooth over social interactions. 90% of people lie on their online dating profiles. 40% of people lie on their resumes. And I thought this one was really interesting. People are more likely to lie over the phone than they are face to face. And if you think about this, I don't have a stat on it, but if it's that much easier to lie over the phone, imagine how much easier it is to lie on the internet. As we move away from these human-to-human interactions in our real lives, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our church groups, and move into more digital or more virtual relationships where it's easier, frankly, to be deceptive. And so again, even the research reveals this dissonance where on one hand, it is so healthy and freeing to be people who practice honesty, and yet we're in a culture where lying is incredibly prevalent. And there's just no way that that prevalence of lying doesn't affect us as individuals. So in today's episode, that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to unpack what exactly is lying, what are different types of lying, why do we lie, is there ever a benefit to lying? And then we're going to get into some really practical strategies and tips and even some scripts for how to bring more honesty into your interactions with other people. Because naming, framing, and braving a path out of lying, I believe, is a truly countercultural move. If we can become people who practice honesty, that is an incredible way of following Jesus in the work of becoming namers of what's true. So number one, what is lying? Well, the basic definition of a lie, according to the dictionary, is to simply make an untrue statement with intent to deceive. The American Psychological Association defines a lie as a false statement made with deliberate intent to deceive, an intentional untruth or falsehoods. If we break that down, there are 3 key elements of a lie. Number one, there's a falsehood. There's information conveyed that is not true. Number 2, there's intention. The person making the statement knows it's false and intends to deceive the listener. And number 3, there's that element of deception, which means it includes another person. The goal is to make the listener believe the false statement is true. We actually want the other person to believe what we're telling them. So there's a falsehood, there's intention, and there's deception of another person. Before we dive deeper into lying, I want to pause and give the definition for honesty, because I think it's really important to hold in the background as we go through this conversation about lying. Being honest in relationships means consistently expressing your true thoughts, feelings, and intentions with kindness and respect. And every part of that definition is important. We are not talking about being harsh or being cruel, right? We're talking about a practice. This is a skill we develop. It takes some commitment to be someone who consistently practices honesty. If we think about the 3 key elements of honesty against those 3 key elements of lying, they're the exact opposite. Instead of falsehood, honesty involves truthfulness. The information that is conveyed is accurate and factual. It doesn't mean we tell all the details, but what we do share is accurate. Number 2, the intention of someone who's making an honest statement is simply to communicate without hidden motives. We're just trying to convey the facts about what we think or feel. And then lastly, instead of deception, honesty is characterized by transparency. The goal of honesty is to be open and clear, allowing the listener to understand the true intent and content of the communication. Now, I want you to imagine for a minute if all of our relationships were really built on honesty. Can you imagine if we lived in a world where we can actually trust what the person in front of us is saying, where our leaders were honest and we trusted that what they were speaking about from behind a podium was actually, in fact, the truth of what they believed without intent to manipulate us or to deceive us, where marketing gurus in advertisements that we see on TV were actually presenting us with facts that we could trust in order to help us make informed decisions, where our friends, where our spouses, where our parents, where our pastors, where our leaders were, to the best of their ability, conveying information in a way that actually matched what they think and feel and believe in any given moment. What a world would that be, where we could trust the words that are being communicated all around us. I honestly think that that kind of honesty in the workplace, in the town square, in our government, in our media, in our social media feeds, in the news that we watch is somewhat rare. It is really hard to find just factual, authentic communication in the broader world around us. And while we cannot solve all the problems in the world around us, we can start in our own lives, in our own friend groups, in our own families, inside ourselves, to be as honest as is humanly possible for us to be. Here's the thing. Honesty doesn't mean we are experts. It doesn't mean that we have all the answers. It also doesn't mean we stop thinking or caring about other people's feelings. There's a lot of nuance to this. And so I want to distinguish what I mean by honesty and some counterfeit versions of it that are out there. Honesty is not oversharing. In fact, honesty might be showing some restraint in our responses. You can be honest without revealing a lot about yourself. Honesty shows discretion. It's not oversharing. Honesty is not bluntness. Bluntness means speaking harshly or in an insensitive manner without regard for the feelings of others. Honesty involves sharing the truth as best we can understand it in a way that is respectful of the listener. Honesty is not being an expert. In fact, often the most honest response we can give, especially about more complicated topics, is, I don't know. I think about this a lot when I try to vet a new healthcare provider or a new mental health provider or a new expert that I'm seeking wisdom from. Can they say, I don't know? I'll look into that further. To me, that's an indicator of somebody who's being honest with me. And I far prefer that than someone who pretends to know everything or to be an expert about something they actually don't know. And lastly, honesty is not the same thing as vulnerability, which we discussed in last week's episode. Honesty doesn't have to involve emotional risk. It can be surface level. And this is really important. I want you to hear me say this. When I'm talking about being honest, it doesn't mean divulging personal or sensitive information. That's vulnerability. And vulnerability is something you really want to safeguard with entrusted, safe relationships. We're going to have different degrees of vulnerability with different people, but that doesn't mean we can't be honest. Honesty is a practice we really can strive to adopt universally in most of our lives. Do the men in your life always complain about the nicks, cuts, and irritation from cheap razors? Well, you've got to meet Henson Shaving. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that is bringing precision engineering to men's shaving experience. 88% of men experience irritation from shaving, yet Henson users have seen dramatic improvements, including the disappearance of ingrown hairs and razor bumps. Henson's aerospace background has enabled the creation of razors with unmatched precision. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give your guy that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. Once he owns a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/bestofyou to pick the razor for you and use code bestofyou to get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/bestofyou and use code bestofyou. If you've had a chance to see Carlos Whitaker's Instafamilia online, you will know the hope he has inspired for thousands of people, not by shying away from hard topics, but by walking into them with dignity and nuance and grace. In a world more connected and yet lonelier than it's ever been, Carlos Whitaker is bringing humans together all over the world. In his podcast, the Carlos Whitaker Podcast, Carlos creates a space where people are safe to engage in conversation about the topics that matter most. His motto is "Don't stand on issues, walk with people." He's hosted guests like Sharon McMahon to try to help bridge political divides in our country. And he talks with his wife, Heather, frequently about being happily married with opposing hot topic views on things. If you're interested in a hope-filled, encouraging way to bridge some of the loneliness and divides in our country, please listen and subscribe to the Carlos Whitaker Podcast anywhere podcasts are found. I've never felt anything so soft or luxurious as my Cozy Earth bamboo sheets. They transport me into what feels like a luxury experience every single night. Picture this. After a long summer day of exploring new horizons or conquering mountain trails, you retreat to the sanctuary of Cozy Earth's bedding. It's not just about comfort, it's about rejuvenation. Ensure your body gets the rest it craves no matter where your adventures take you. Say goodbye to restless nights and hello to revitalizing sleep, whether you're under the stars or amidst city lights. Adventure awaits this summer, and Cozy Earth ensures you're equipped for every step of the journey. Their travel-friendly products packed in totes are the perfect companions for your adventures both near and far. And when it's time to relax during a long flight or a post-hike wind down, slip into Cozy Earth's temperature-regulating bamboo joggers and pullover crew to stay cool, comfortable, and ready for whatever your adventure brings you next. Whether you're exploring distant lands or enjoying a staycation right at home, Cozy Earth has your back. My listeners have been given an exclusive 35% off with code BESTOFYOU at CozyEarth.com. Prioritize your well-being without sacrificing adventure this summer. Let Cozy Earth be your trusted companion on the path to health, fitness, and unforgettable experiences. So what does the Bible say about lying? Most of us have this idea that lying is wrong. It's sort of built into our moral code, which is why a lot of us experience dissonance inside, not only inside of ourselves when we're tempted to tell a lie, but also in our culture when we're aware that there's lying going on around us. We have this sense that it's not good, that there's something wrong with it, even though we don't always know how to name it or identify it. And so here's some context from the Bible just to undergird our conversation. It's one of the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20:16, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. And if we look at the context of that time period, false testimony was really important because justice was really dependent on people's words, people's narratives about what happened. There was no such thing as video evidence or a paper trail or an email trail like we have today. If you needed to go to someone and say, hey, this person has done this thing to harm me, it was your word against theirs, very literally. And so in ancient Israel, legal systems relied heavily on the verbal testimony, on the honesty of witnesses to make fair judgments. We also see admonitions for honesty in Proverbs. Proverbs 12:22 says, the Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. And then we get to the New Testament, Ephesians 4:25. Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. And then Colossians 3:9-10, do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator. We see Paul encouraging believers to become people of integrity with one another, to let their honesty characterize this new Christian community that was forming, that was to be different from the culture at large that was racked with lying and deception and manipulating other people. We are to put that off. We are to become people who are honest with each other. And then we see in John 8:44, Jesus referring to the enemy of our souls as the father of lies. He says there is no truth in him, and he's referring to the devil. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. There's such a stark contrast between the father of lies and the truth that sets us free that we find in the person of Jesus. And so this idea of becoming people who are truthful, people who are honest, people with deep integrity, people whose yes means yes and whose no means no, people who present themselves on the outside as who they really are on the inside, is incredibly important to those of us who are seeking to follow in the ways of Jesus and differentiate ourselves from the ways of the culture all around us. It reminds me of a book that's a little bit older. It came out a few decades ago by M. Scott Peck. It's called People of the Lie. And the book is a really profound, incisive exposition of the way deception is at the root of so much evil, so much toxicity, so much abuse, so much of the interpersonal trauma that infects relationships and neighborhoods and communities and cultures. Lying is so insidious, and it can start really, really small. And that's where we're going to focus most of our attention today. But if we're not careful, small, tiny, even little white lies grow and erode our integrity, our honesty, and keep us from bringing the goodness, the beauty, the freedom that we are meant to have in our own lives and we are meant to bring into the world around us. I want to touch on what the research in psychology says about lying. It underscores what we know to be true from the Bible. There's some very recent research published in the British Journal of Social Psychology that reveals that lying is not only unhealthy for our relationships, but it's not healthy for us. Number one, it tends to lower our self-esteem. It's a little bit of a self-perpetuating cycle. At its most basic, we often lie because we're not confident in ourselves. We might feel shame about ourselves. We don't trust that people will still love us if we were to show up honestly as who we really are. So lying often stems from feeling bad about ourselves, but it actually then decreases our self-esteem. Instead of healing that root, when we lie, we stay stuck in that loop. I don't feel good about myself, so I lie. But then when I lie, I feel even worse about myself. And so then we just stay trapped and stuck in this cycle of self-defeat. Number two, lying actually increases negative emotion. There can be a hit of relief immediately after a lie, especially if it gets you out of a tricky situation. But what the study found was that no matter whether you're telling lies to get out of something or to puff up your own ego, or if you're telling lies to please someone else or to protect someone else's feelings, regardless of the type of lie, it tends to increase negative emotions over time. It increases dissonance inside. It increases anxiety. We don't actually solve things with the people to whom we're lying. Over time, those negative feelings just continue to fester inside of us because we're not actually bringing what we really feel out into the open where we can work through it with someone else. In fact, there was one study I thought was so fascinating where the people in the study were given an honesty challenge to not tell one lie for 10 weeks. And I remember the Jim Carrey movie, Liar, Liar, that is similar to this study. But what they found is that the folks in the study who were challenged to not tell a lie for 10 weeks experienced significant improvements in their physical and mental health. Lying isn't good for us. It's not good for our relationships. And in contrast, honesty is so good for us, and it's so good for our relationships. I do want to touch on the question, are there ever any benefits to lying? And this is an important caveat. If you're in a dangerous situation with someone who is threatening you psychologically or physically, or they're going to emotionally blackmail you, or for any reason you need to get out of that situation, or you have to keep up a lie until you can get out of that situation, that's a very different thing. In that situation, you are using a lie and deception strategically and systematically to keep yourself or someone you love safe. And I hope that goes without saying, but I do want to say that if you're someone who's in an abusive situation or a toxic situation, and the only way to keep yourself safe is to lie in that setting until you can get yourself to safety, that's a very different thing. And please know that there's been a lot of studies done on the ethics of that it can be a very strategic way to create enough safety until you can find your way to safety. And then also when it comes to lying, there are situations where when telling the truth might cause an unnecessary pain, a lie can be used again strategically to protect someone's feelings. And I'm using that word strategically because there's a conscious awareness of it. I'm going to lie in this situation. And so in those situations where you're protecting yourself or protecting someone else, you're not deceiving yourself. You're not deceiving God. And hopefully there's at least one or two other people in your life that knows what you're doing and why you're doing it in this case. Okay, what are some different types of lies? So I thought this was interesting to touch on. These are the 4 most common types of lies that people tell. Number 1, the little white lie. This is the one that is the most common. 72% of all people admit to telling little white lies. I'm pretty sure it's possible that the other 28% who say they don't tell little white lies are potentially telling a little white lie. Here's the thing about white lies. They're the least harmful of the different types of lies. They're usually told in order to avoid hurting someone else's feelings, to be polite, to smooth over social situations. Common little white lies. Someone asks you how you're doing. Maybe you're having a terrible day and you say, "I'm fine," with a smile. Or maybe your friend or your spouse or your child is wearing a new outfit and you don't think it looks that great, but in the moment you don't want to hurt their feelings. And so you tell them, "Oh my gosh, I love it," right? You actually are trying to get them to believe you like the thing you don't really like. Another common example of when we tell little white lies, someone asks you to do something that you just don't want to do, or for whatever reason, you don't want to tell them the real reason you can't do it. And so you make up a lie. You feign an illness. You suddenly magically have guests coming in out of town, out of nowhere. Whatever the thing is that you make up, it's because you don't want to hurt their feelings. Little white lies are more common in some cultures more than others. They're more common in some parts of the U.S. than other parts of the U.S. Regardless, a little white lie does still meet the criteria for what a lie is. You're saying something that's not true. There's an intention to deceive the listener, right? You're not just saying something neutral. You're not just saying, "Wow, what an interesting outfit." The lie is, "I love it." And you're actually trying to make the listener believe that that false statement is true, that you actually love it. Even if in some situations we tell a little white lie to save somebody's feelings, at the very least, we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to own it with ourselves and with God. Because if we don't, we start to deceive ourselves. We don't know anymore what we think is true, what we feel, what the real reason is. Even in these cases with little white lies, we still want to practice honesty with ourselves. Somewhere you've got to tell the truth. And I call it a practice because we have to practice this skill, this muscle inside of ourselves. It's a very countercultural practice for most of us. Okay, number 2, another big category of lies are lies we tell about our personal accomplishments. 64% of people admit to lying in this way. These are the lies where we exaggerate our achievements, our skills, maybe lie about our weight or our height. Maybe we take credit for something we didn't really do. Maybe we exaggerate something in a job interview. Again, you might have a good reason to do this in a given situation, but in general, why not try to be as honest as possible? Number 3, the third most common type of lie that we tell are lies about our emotions. And I think this one is so interesting because the practice of honesty requires us to be honest about how we're actually feeling inside of ourselves first. And a lot of the work that I do in The Best of You, and I Shouldn't Feel This Way, and Boundaries for Your Soul, is trying to teach you how to get to the root of what you are actually thinking and feeling in any given moment. Not necessarily so you go tell everybody that, but so that you know, actually, here's how I feel about this thing. I'm going to figure out how to share that in a way that is constructive, not destructive. But if we're in a habit of lying or covering over or even deceiving ourselves about our emotions, that bleeds out to where we don't have emotional truth in our relationship. And we tend to do this, especially in social situations or intimate relationships, to avoid conflict, right? We don't want to deal with the actual hard conversation that we need to have. And if we make a habit of this, we lose sight of what we actually feel or think inside of ourselves. So, for example, we pretend that we're happy when we're really upset or frustrated or angry. We bury those negative emotions instead of naming them honestly. Maybe somebody hurts you, and instead of saying, yeah, that really hurt, we shove it under the carpet. It's really a lie. It's not emotionally honest when we say, no, it was fine, it was okay, it didn't bother me at all, when in fact, the thing that happened did hurt me or did bother me. And when we do that, we dig a hole for ourselves, because what if down the road we actually want to have a conversation about this thing that's been bothering us, but we've spent weeks, months, maybe years denying that the thing bothers us. It makes it really hard to earn the trust of that person that you want to have an honest conversation with if for years you've been denying the very thing you actually finally realize you need to name and discuss. And so, again, we can find our way out of these things. It's never too late to start being honest. It's never too late to say, you know what? I haven't been honest with you. I actually have been bothered by this for a lot of years, and I'm sorry that I wasn't honest with you sooner, but I do need to have this conversation, right? There are ways that you can approach that, but I will say that's why a practice of emotional honesty is so important early on in your relationships. That baseline practice of at the very least saying, I'm not sure how this makes me feel. I need to think about it for a little while and then get back to you. And then finally, another big thing we lie about is we lie to protect our privacy. And this is a tricky one because we might even have a really good motivation. Maybe you don't want a friend to know what you did over the weekend because you don't want to hurt her feelings that you did some things with people without including her. So you might be tempted to lie, or you might just want to have some privacy at a social gathering. Someone asked you a question and you just don't really want to answer it. And so you might be tempted to lie. Again, there's a understandable motivation for all of these different types of lies, right? Lying doesn't actually get us the real thing we want, which is honesty and transparency, even when honesty and transparency means saying, I'd rather not answer that question. I'd rather not share that information with you. I'm not comfortable divulging that, right? It kind of gets into boundaries. The more honest we become, the healthier our boundaries are going to become with other people. Because typically in all of these cases, if we're lying to protect someone else or to protect ourselves, we're not doing the harder, deeper, holier work of getting to the root of how can I show up authentically? How can I show up honestly, authentically? Because that's ultimately what's going to be good, not only for me, but for the health of this relationship, even if this is a relationship that needs to have more healthy distance, because I don't want to answer these questions this person keeps asking me? Did you know that most air fresheners and candles release dangerous chemicals into the air? So how do you scent your home and keep your loved ones safe? Introducing AromaTrue, the state-of-the-art, waterless, atomizing diffuser that transforms essential oils into a fine mist without the need for water. Say goodbye to sticky messes and worries about mold or bacteria. AromaTrue's innovative design efficiently disperses up to 4 oils at a time, allowing you to create your own custom fragrance blends with just the touch of a button. And right now, AromaTrue is offering a free waterless oil diffuser and a free organic lemon eucalyptus oil when you sign up for their Insider Club Essential Oil subscription. Sign up for AromaTrue's Insider Club today, and you'll receive a free waterless oil diffuser and a free lemon eucalyptus oil. That's over $200 in savings. Head to aromatrueorganics.com/bestofyou to take advantage of this exclusive offer. That's aromatrueorganics.com/bestofyou. Join AromaTrue's Insider Club and scent your home organically. Getting high-quality food and household essentials delivered right to my doorstep, whether it's my favorite Dave's Killer Bread, incredible wine, or 7th-generation cleaning supplies, has been a game changer for me. I love that Thrive Market only allows trusted, top-quality ingredients while restricting thousands of harmful ingredients like artificial flavors, high-fructose corn syrup, and more. And with just a few clicks, I can filter out ingredients that I don't want, like gluten or high sugar content, making it so easy to find the items I need for my family. Best of all, when you join Thrive Market, you are also helping a family in need with their 1-for-1 membership matching program. You join, they give. Save time and money and shop Thrive Market today. Go to thrivemarket.com/bestofyou for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/bestofyou. thrivemarket.com/bestofyou. That brings us to, what are the different motivations for lying? Number one is self-protection, self-preservation. We might want to avoid a consequence that we actually need to face. Sometimes we are trying to protect ourselves from hurt. We don't want to feel rejected by the other person. We don't want to feel judged by the other person. We don't want to feel criticized. These are all really valid reasons to want to do something to put a barrier in that conversation with that other person. The intention there makes sense, but the strategy of lying is not the healthiest strategy typically in that moment. Number two, we want social acceptance or approval. We want people to like us. We want to fit in. We want to make a smooth social environment, right? We're at a party, we're at church, we're in the neighborhood, and we don't want to be weird. We don't want to be odd, right? We just want to play along, play the social game, just answer the questions, but we don't actually really want to share what's really going on. So we just make up lies, right? Just to keep the social norms of civility going. Again, understandable, right? You don't want to feel socially awkward. I get that. And also, we have to really think about a healthier way of being honest. And then lastly, the last motivation, this is the least common but very real, is we're trying to be controlling and manipulative, where there's actually a malicious component for the lie. This might be where there's a gaslighting component or a narcissistic component where someone is lying to get power over you, to try to manipulate you, to try to control you, to try to create a narrative that's untrue, to keep you feeling small or to sustain their own narcissism, right? This is the most toxic kind of lying. This is where we get into abusive lying, and it's important to name. And this is very real. We do see this from time to time where there's a really malicious motivation behind the lying. So I want to close today by giving you some practical tips and strategies to name, frame, and brave lying in your own life. As you listened, you probably were resonating with some of those examples, some of those motivations more than others. So how do we become people who are honest? First of all, name it. And this is a quote from chapter 2 of I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Name what's hard. Start with yourself. Just notice, when am I lying? You might even think about, as you're listening today, Was there a moment that you told a lie? Maybe it was at a store, at the grocery store checkout line. Maybe it was with a boss. Maybe it was with your own child. These are all common places that we lie. There's no shame in this, but to notice and become aware, yeah, that's a place I am tempted to lie. When I talked about that neighborhood barbecue, if that's a place for you where you're like, man, that is a place where those social gatherings where I'm really tempted to lie because I just can't stand social awkwardness, but I also don't want to answer the questions. Notice that. Name that. Naming without shame is the first step to braving a better way forward. And then number 2, do some framing work. Ask yourself, why did I lie in that situation? What is the motivation behind it for me? Whatever the situation is, you might ask yourself a really powerful question. I think this is one of the most powerful questions we can ask ourselves when we're framing something like this. What am I afraid would happen if I were to tell the truth? You might even ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen in this situation if I told the truth? In contrast, what's the best thing that could happen if you were honest in that situation? And that question can reveal a lot. You might notice that there's actually nothing you really fear. It's just habit. You've just gotten into the habit of lying as a coping mechanism for social anxiety, or you've gotten into the habit of lying when you feel embarrassed or when you feel fearful of conflict, even as you recognize that's not necessary, that the person is someone you could actually have a really healthy conversation with. Sometimes we fall into the habit of lying as a conditioned survival response that lingers all the way from childhood, where maybe we learned to lie as a way to survive as children because we were fearful of judgment or shame or repercussions. And this can happen if you're someone who's high in empathy or highly sensitive. Maybe you had parents or caregivers who were shaming or who were critical. And so you just learned to lie really quickly to keep yourself protected from that. And that conditioned response has followed you into some of your adult relationships. You might notice that. And then you've got to ask yourself, wait a minute, how do I heal that in the context of my current relationships? Because the people around me now aren't actually unsafe. They're not actually shaming or judging or criticizing me. So I actually want to work on being honest with them, right? As you frame it, that might be something that surfaces for you. Or maybe as you ask yourself what you're afraid of, you realize, oh my gosh, I'm actually afraid that this person's going to get really angry with me. And they actually are unsafe. And the reason I lie in this setting is because they're not safe. And that's actually a very real threat. And that's a very different way of framing it. Because if that's the case, then you might need to think about talking with a therapist or a trusted advisor or a friend about this relationship that's unsafe and how you either get help creating more safety in the relationship or put more boundaries around your relationship with this person so that you're not being exposed to their toxicity, right? And so in that case, the framing is very different. It may be that lying is helping you to survive, and so we've got to get you to safety. Framing is so important to understand what's going on behind lying behaviors. Another framing question I really like is asking yourself, who do I find myself really being honest with? Where it's just so easy to be honest. And see if you can identify what are the ingredients in that relationship that bring out that honesty inside of you. What's that about? And notice that and move toward that. And then finally, once you've named the lie, framed it, and understood a little bit more the function that lying behavior is serving in your life, you can then take brave steps toward more honesty. You might brave healthier boundaries. As we've said, if there are certain situations or certain people who evoke that lying part of you as a survival strategy, you might need to implement some healthier boundaries in those situations or with those people. If you've identified there's sort of a habit component. You might need to brave more mindfulness, and this will feel awkward at first, but maybe you brave a pause when someone asks you a question and you get really aware of that feeling inside of, oh, a lie is about to come out of my mouth. I'm going to just take a deep breath, pause, and see if I can say something honest. It might be as simple as saying, I don't know how to answer that question, or I'm not sure what just happened. I need a minute, or I'm not sure how to respond in this situation. That pause and that breath can really help you connect to that Holy Spirit-led self inside of you that is yearning to bring forth more truthfulness, even if what's truest in that moment is, I don't know, I need more time. Can I get back to you? I'm not sure how to answer this right now. You're showing up more authentically when you give yourself the gift of that pause. Practice finding one thing you can say that is true. And then lastly, along the lines of that pause, right? Practice being really honest, especially in those situations where there's an opportunity to give a written reply. Take your time. Don't text right back if you need to turn down an invitation. Think about it. What's really true here? What am I trying to convey? Because I can't go to this event, and the truth is I don't really want to do more things like this with this other person. So I don't also just want to make up an excuse or pretend I'm sick or pretend I have company. What I actually want to say in this moment is something like, I so appreciate your thinking of me. I'm not a big fan of X, but I love to find other things that we could do together, right? That's an honest reply that honors the invitation, but also honors the truth about how you really feel. Or if someone asks you for help and you really care about that person, but you don't have the bandwidth to provide the help they need, instead of telling one of those little white lies, honoring them with the truth where you say, man, I am so sorry for what you're going through. I am with you. I need to be honest. I am also going through a lot right now, so I don't have a lot of margin. So I just want you to know I'm with you in spirit. I am rooting for you, but I just don't have a lot to give during this season. I mean, these are hard things to say, but in those relationships where you really want to develop more authenticity, more truthfulness, I promise you, if you give yourself the spaciousness, the pause, the time to really look inside yourself and notice what is actually true and formulate a response that is both honest and kind, you will start to experience the joy, the freedom, the confidence of knowing that you are aligning with what's true. And you will start to bring more goodness, more beauty, more authenticity into your relationships and into the world around you. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.